Okay, welcome everyone for joining us to our first 2021 business webinar, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeanine Niyonzima-Aroian. I am the owner of JNP Coffee. I'm also on the SCA USA chapter as a Northeast Regional Coordinator, and we have been having this business webinar on a regular basis last year, and this is our first of the year. And I'm very excited to be joined by two very special guests, which I'm going to be introducing right now. The first one is Tom Herald. Tom, he's with the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center. He's also an adjunct faculty member at Clark University here in Massachusetts. Our other presenter is Sarah Sepasi. Sarah is a lawyer. She's based in California, and she has a law firm, and her focus is on business and employment. And also she focuses on restaurant and hospitality, which is something that's also very relevant for us, as well as emerging companies. So today we are really going to give each one of our presenter, give us a quick presentation about what they think is very relevant for us. It's specifically for Tom. I want him to be talking more on things that has to do with rules and language of financial reporting, especially related to those who have received the PPP and also grants post COVID-19. And I'm also going to have Sarah address some issues that have to do with employment, not only in California, hopefully, just that also are affecting everybody across the country, especially post-COVID and post the furloughs that everybody has to go through because of this situation that we are all still in. But I also want later on Tom to be able to provide us more of some of the fundamental, as well as Sarah, what are the things are really fundamental that keep this, the businesses stable and also working stronger even during unexpected events like the COVID-19, among others, and unforeseen events that are always going to be happening in our lives and also in our businesses. So with no further ado, I'm going to open the floor for Tom to start presenting. And please do know that this is recorded, and then you can always go back to this later on. And I want to invite the audience later on to open your cameras so we can be able to see you, and so we can have like an interactive discussion. So Tom, please welcome.
Well, thank you, Jeanine. I'm glad to be here. I do want to say and clarify one thing, that me talking today, I don't really look at it as being a presentation, but more of an interaction. And I'd like to get to know some of you as you're talking. So please look at anything that I'm talking about as being informal. And if you have a question, just get our attention and ask it, because the idea is to have this be an interactive environment where you can get some of your own answers to questions that you might have. But I will start off by saying that one of my first clients that I had at the beginning of this pandemic was a specialty coffee roaster here in Worcester, Massachusetts. He's a member of the SCA and has done a wonderful job with me throughout the year, and just basically reacting to challenges that this pandemic has created for a small business owner. I say that because I think that anybody that's in a retail business, particularly a food service provider, has been hit particularly hard by that. Now, there have been, as Jeanine mentioned, many government programs that are there to help get through this together in the forms of the EIDL loans that's came through the Small Business Administration, also with the banks that are out there participating in SBA-backed loans, such as the Paycheck Protection Program. But I've also found, and I'm sure in different states they have the same type of elements, but in Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation that's offered grants. Towns and cities have offered grants for business owners. One thing that all of these organizations and entities have in common as they're requesting information from applicants is to make sure that they have their financials in line. And I have seen, I don't know how many times where a good business, a very well-run business as far as being enjoyed by the communities, don't have their financials in order, so they can't apply. Every one of these applications require submitting your financials for the last year and the year before. And the reason is that even for grants, they want to make sure that you're a good steward of your own money and that you're a going process, meaning that you're a profitable entity. The worst thing that a lender is going to do, whether that's an SBA-backed loan or just a town or a city, giving a grant to a business owner is to think that they're going to waste that money, because they're actually held accountable for the funds that they're dissipating. And their way of knowing whether or not this money's not being wasted is that it's going to a good cause is your ability to show your report card. Your report card is going to come in the form of either a cash flow statement and or your profit and loss statement, otherwise known as the income statement. And that's something that I have a conversation with clients on a routine basis. Hold that thought for just a moment though. Just have started the month of February. And if you're a business operator right now, your report card to yourself, number one, is what you're doing to basically keep track of your progress throughout the year. Those are your financial records that you keep. Now, I'm assuming that as we're starting this year, I'm going to ask this rhetorically, just, how are you defining yourself in a situation for 2021? That same coffee roaster that I was asking, I met with him yesterday, and we got hung up a little bit on how he's defining a win for the year for the team. And he said, whoa, get a win for the team, and sort of scratched his head thinking about that. Now, this is a guy that keeps track of everything in his operation. But for him to look at the scenario for it and think about how am I going to define the win for my team for 2021, what that does, it focuses the team on achieving one thing. And basically what he's looking to do is achieve $1 million in revenue for the year. That's off from where he was the prior year and the prior year before that, before the pandemic. But he as the CEO of that company is looking at it. That would be a success if we're able to do that. That's going to require us to diversify about 30 or 40% of our revenue. Now, if he didn't have a good grasp on his profit and loss statement, he wouldn't be able to identify that. So the reason I'm bringing that up is he is a recipient of EIDL and like I said, 2 rounds of the Paycheck Protection Program loans. He got those because he was on top of his financial reporting. Just as important of that, though, is defining what the win is for the year. That $1 million goal allows him to focus himself and everybody on the team to achieving something that they have to think outside of the box and be creative. Had it not been for setting that kind of a goal up, I don't think that they would be thinking of all the different elements of revenue that they actually need to diversify. I'd like to know out there, just want to ask a question just generally, and it's probably as an icebreaker question, but as we're into the almost the 1 year point with the coronavirus, what has been your biggest challenge financially as a coffee shop owner? Do we have owners out there, Jeanine?
We do actually. We have some, coffee owners. We have our importers. So any one of them can feel free to speak up. And as I said, please feel free to open your mic. Don't be afraid. This is like being in a family room. We want you to be able to be successful as the new year starts, as we still continuously being challenged in this environment. So please feel free to ask any question you feel free to ask. So.
Well, another spin on that would be one of the challenges that you've been able to face yourself, how you've overcome that challenge. I like to look at it from lessons learned and best practices, and that's how we all get better. So if you have something that you've done that has actually helped you solve your cash flow problem for the year and maybe a revenue challenge, I'd like to know that.
I will break the ice with a question or a little bit of a statement that somebody offered me. They weren't able to join the call today, but they are going to catch the recording, I believe. But when I asked them about how it was going for them, just like, post-COVID, and they had admitted that okay, so we weathered the storm and, we're here, we survived. But now they're looking at more financial hits taking place so that they could kind of refresh their space, kind of get it back in the public's eye, spend some more marketing dollars to encourage people to come back. So they're working on how to compete in the market, and they're noticing more shops and businesses that have popped up since COVID, since the pandemic started, so now there's more competition. So I don't know if there's any advice for that, but that was just kind of a general statement that they shared about how things are going for them and what financial hurdles they're planning to undertake soon.
That's an interesting perspective, Manzi. We have actually seen a really strong uptick in the number of startups, a lot of people that are wanting to start their own business, and many of them even still diving into the restaurant scene. One thing I didn't mention is Zoom. It's got a chat function, and sometimes you might not want to ask your question out in front of everybody, but if you were to list that with a chat,
Yeah,
we'd be able to dig into that. And I think that might be a good method.
exactly. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, Tom.
This is Nate from Brio Coffee Works in Vermont.
Nate,
Hi, Jeanine. We've weathered the storm as well, pretty well financially. Actually, we're a roaster. We do some retail, but quite a bit of wholesale. And I would say what helped us out, which I think is a good lesson learned for us and maybe for other roasters, is diversification efforts actually pre-COVID, getting into e-commerce, and also making sure that beyond our cafe wholesale partners, we were selling into grocery channels, which really helped balance out the drop off in cafe and restaurant business. But on the challenges front, not directly financial, but indirectly for sure, our biggest challenge has been supply chains. Supply chains are just totally broken. And the logistics of getting everything from coffee bags to green coffee, to getting packages to our customers who order through the e-commerce channel. That has all been just a total mess, and definitely had financial ramifications. We've done fine, but it's been very stressful making sure that we have the supplies that we need and getting things to our customers in time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing into that. Actually, Nate, I think this is really right on. I think two things that I'm hearing here was diversification. You always have to think about diversifying your business. And then one of the things that I have found myself into, people always ask me the same thing: how are you doing? And then our business is up and down. So, and the reason is some of our clients have done very well in this environment, and those were the ones who already have a very diversified portfolio in terms of how they go to market. And we have other ones who have suffered tremendously because they had a very narrow focus of how they were going to market. So, and I know that Tom is going to touch about some of the key fundamental of the businesses, but really being diversified kind of like help anyone in these situations where you don't know how things are going to turn, not just having all your eggs in one pile, if I might say, but just really be able to kind of like have your business quite diversified and really kind of providing that stability when there is some storm like what we just have gone through. But it's very interesting what you just said to Nate, because there's a lot of disruption in the supply chain just in general, even when it comes to transportation. In our case, as an importer of green coffee, we have just seen some of the tremendous change in the time that it takes for our coffee, for example, to get here, where some shipments would take like 30 days from the port of Tanzania to to New Jersey. All of a sudden we are experiencing like 45 days or even more. And it's not only just like, a small business, it's just like across the board. Some of the big lines, the steamship lines are just like all of a sudden being now affected by COVID. I joke about this because I always tell people, we have COVID in the first world, the developing countries were the least affected. And they were kind of wondering what's going on out there, what's going on in the first world. But, it finally starting to actually kind of like hit them. Now they are seeing some of things that they were not expecting to be affecting them, like delays in shipments, from origin that were not, anticipated. So we are also telling, our clients, meaning like roasters and the such, please anticipate, always have some room of, especially like in this environment, you have to have some room of wiggling. In other words, maybe expand when you expect to be receiving some of the coffee, because things are not the same as they used to be. It's not like I'm going to just send something with FedEx and I know it's going to get to you, the next day. Those days are gone. I think that's even like, DHL and the such. I have a package coming from Burundi. They usually get it to me like in a week. That's getting in 2 weeks. So I don't want to take too much time here, but I really want to hear from more other individuals who are on the call, if you have any specific question, this is your table.
Nate brings up a very good point there, Jeanine, and I think what it reminds me of one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in business as an operator myself, and that is at the height of my first business, I was enjoying making money and having fun, and I thought pretty full of myself. And I had this older gentleman, he was almost retired. Just before he was getting ready to retire, he came by and he said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." You know, well, I was at the height, and he said, "It's sort of like ice cream, it's going to melt." And I remember thinking in the back of my mind, I was polite with him, but in the back of my mind, I thought, well, that might have how it was in your day, old man, but it's not how it applies. Those rules don't apply to me. I'm too good of an operator. But he told me something that stuck with me, and that was that the only constant in business is change. And I think that COVID is probably the best example of that as I've ever seen. And what Nate's talking about is, you know, I'm working really hard. I'm doing really well meeting the demand. We're not missing a beat, but now you're relying on other people in that supply chain and their businesses. They might not be as good of an operator as Nate is with his coffee shop, and it's messed up his supply chain for operating. So you've got to be able to react to that and overcome it. I think that a good reaction plan for business is twofold. One is financially, is to have a budget. If you don't have a budget, this should show you the need for having a good budget and going forward. The other thing is when you have a monthly budget that itemizes each one of your expenses, I foot stomp on this. We should have at least 90 days worth of money in the bank to cover expenses for 3 months. So look at that. Whatever your monthly expenses are on your budget, have 90 days or 3 months supply in the bank account just to be able to cover you and give you some slush fund. A lot of businesses that don't have that, you know, they've really encountered a lot of problems this last year. The ones that do have that, and I think one of the most important things that Nate said that I heard him say was, we did all the things that we did right before the pandemic sort of helped us pay off and diversify later. Is that what you were meaning, Nate?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. I mean, not to pat myself on the back too much, but you know, some of it was very intentional. Others were just like opportunities that we fell into. But yeah, it turns out that we made, unbeknownst to us, we made some good decisions before the pandemic that really made our business viable during this strange period.
I'm a military guy, and we were taught early on in the military that when we go through things, at the end of it, you do this thing called a debrief. And I think for any one of the teams that are there, it's good for you guys to have a huddle session and identify those decisions that you made that were good before the pandemic, during it, and now how do you evaluate that? And the things that you didn't do very well, take a moment and put that in the lessons learned pile. We don't ever want to do that again. We want to learn from both our successes and our mistakes.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to switch to Sarah a little bit. I'll come back to you because I know you have a lot of things to share with us. So just hold your thought, and let's go back to Sarah. And Sarah, if you can please just chime in and share with us some of the rules and as well that has to do with businesses and also law in general that business owners should be aware of, not only just now, but all the times as a fundamentals for their businesses.
Yeah. So I'm Sarah. I practice, as Jeanine mentioned, I practice business and employment law in California. So I'm going to speak to that generally. And then of course, some of these laws may vary based on what jurisdiction you're in. But I would say just in the very big picture, I think that I want to echo what Tom was saying, which was about how change is constant. I think there has probably been no time where that has echoed more true than in these days of COVID, and particularly with respect to employment law. I don't know if members of the audience share in this, but I have found a lot of my clients basically asking me, we don't know what laws apply. We don't know where, like, the health department's saying one thing, the county's saying another thing, the governor's saying something, the CDC's saying something else. Like, where do we just go to know what to do, right? So one thing I would always recommend is, regardless of what size business you are, to have a trusted attorney that you can go to and you feel comfortable reaching out to, who's approachable. And I recognize that having a lawyer is a cost concern. So, having a setup or working with somebody who you can reach out to with your quick questions, which often are not quick questions, but, rather than trying to navigate these things on your own. I think I'm a big proponent of recognizing that as a small business owner, your energy is limited, and there are places to outsource and there are places to not. So that's my plug for having a go-to employment lawyer. Now, why do I say that, even if you're a small shop? Well, I think that there are a number of things that you can essentially create, like, quote unquote templates for, that you can use for your business. Now, when I say create templates, I don't mean go on Google and type in job application and print out that one and call that your template. I think there are a number of documents that I'll walk through now that will help you efficiently run your business so that you have the energy to deal with things as they come up and you have to pivot. So I would encourage everyone to essentially just start at the beginning, which would be at when an employee applies to work for your company. And so there are a number of concerns or quote unquote like blind spots that might come up during that process. And so one of them would be just having, what does your job application look like? Are there questions on there that actually are not compliant with the law in your state? For example, in California, you are not permitted to ask about somebody's salary history. So if your job application says something like, where did you work last? How much were you paid? That's not compliant. And things like that, they do attach to your brand because there are so many examples of little mistakes along the way that could be prevented. So that's just like one example on a job application. A second thing that I always encourage people to have is almost like a hiring packet, which I recognize everybody does, but what exactly is in that hiring packet? There are a number of standard documents that everybody knows, the W-4, the I-9, things like that, but what else? I think that when you're onboarding employees, it's critical to have obviously like an employee handbook, but where does that employee handbook come from? If it's something that was just printed or received from like your payroll company, the odds are that a payroll company has a generic handbook that kind of applies to almost like every kind of industry. And I can bet like 98% that there are a number of policies in that handbook that don't apply to your business. Now, why does that matter? It matters because having a strong set of employee policies is essentially like the best defense if you were ever involved in employee litigation. So how does that work? If, for example, you end up in a legal dispute with a current or former employee, and some policy was broken. Let's say there's some claim that they're not taking their rest breaks, for example. You want to be able to turn to a very clear meal and rest break policy in your handbook that is actually correct. Now, a lot of these generic ones, they're not written correctly. And you also want these policies to be practical. It needs to make sense for your business. If the reality is your employees are not able to sign in and do the, certain things don't work for every business. So really sitting down with an attorney at the onset and getting really crystal clear policies like your meal and rest break, like your disability policies, like your request for accommodation policies. Sometimes employees will, they will need an accommodation. What does that look like? What is sort of the forms and the procedure that they would follow? And it's a really, really useful exercise to walk through all of those steps with an employment attorney at the, as early as you can in your business, and recognize that as much as that's an investment, it's so much more than just a handbook. That's like kind of going to be almost like your template for running your business. And I'm happy to elaborate on that if anybody wants me to. But a number of other templates that I would kind of recommend, and I don't even like the word templates because it sounds generic, but what I'm saying is to have almost like these weapons in your arsenal that you can use in any given situation. So for example, what to do if an employee tests positive for COVID. Like with my clients, I basically have like a little guide, and it's like every step, every form, outlines exactly what to do when that happens. So it's almost like clockwork. Like we get this, we get a notice of a positive test, boom, we send out the notice that immediately notifies all employees, because in California, you're required to do that within 1 day. We send out a privacy thing that disclose it, that covers your bases as far as explaining who the without naming the employee, like it follows all the privacy rules. Then what do we do next? Like template email to the health department. Like, so there's so many situations like that you can kind of prepare for. And so that's another thing I recommend. So what do you do if you receive like a sexual harassment complaint? Where does it go? What's the next step? Having a number of these kinds of things ready to go, I think is critical, because then it frees up your bandwidth to sort of run your company. And I think COVID has really presented a number of these newer challenges. And so just having some kind of trusted partner or resource where you can be guided towards what guidance is actually applicable, I think is huge. So those are a few thoughts that I had.
Sarah, can I ask you a question on that, what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were talking about what to do if an employee tests positive for COVID, a lot of employees don't test right now on a regular basis. So if you have somebody who thinks they have symptoms, or they might have the flu or something like that, anyway, they're displaying symptoms, and they call in and say, I'm sick. How would you recommend that a small business owner approach that problem?
Yeah, so let's see. I can explain what I do with one of the coffee shops that I work with, which they have like a symptoms questionnaire, which I'm sure everybody has seen some version of. It says like sneezing, coughing, etc. And every day the employees just log, they initial if they're experiencing symptoms. Why? Because that covers the employee. The employer, that they are monitoring these things. But that's a side note. What I would probably advise them to do is tell that employee not to come to work or to go home. And then they would go home and test and encourage them to test. As an employer, you don't have to pay for the test. A lot of employers choose to pay for the test. And at least in California, if you have a certain number of positive cases, the employer is then required to pay for the test. So I would, figure out whatever the rules are in your jurisdiction, but it's kind of a judgment call. But I would say just, tell them to stay home. If it turns out that they test and then they are positive, there's a number of steps that they would have to go through to shut down either close the store, isolate the employees, test some of the other employees. It kind of depends on where you're located and what your jurisdiction is doing. Does that?
I'm thinking about two questions here, and everybody, as I said, this is your opportunity. Ask questions, and you can ask them now. You can also reach to any of these individuals later on. If you need their contact information, we're going to make them available. But one of the things that pops up in my mind as you're discussing about these laws, Sarah, if, for example, you are, cafe owner, and you want to make sure that you're encouraging your workers to make sure that they can come forward, and if they're not feeling well or they have any symptoms to actually speak up, what are you recommending that is the right thing to do? Because I've heard some of their, companies out there that are having, employees who just not say that they are not feeling well, even though they know they might be, not feeling well, or they might be, positive, or maybe have not gotten tested. What could be done so they can encourage them to actually make sure they go tested, so they can actually make sure they become very open and transparent, to everyone else, because they're not only protecting themselves, but they're also protecting their co-workers. There are a lot of people and a lot of companies I've heard out there that they actually are forcing their own employees to actually just file for unemployment. So in case they just don't show up for 14 days, it's on you. What is the best practices that you can actually recommend us to show everybody here?
Yeah, so I guess that goes back to like having good employee policies that, and when I say policies, sure, it's one thing to have something in your handbook, it's another thing to put into action, but having it in your handbook at least is like a backup for if you were ever involved in a legal situation. So the first would be to have like and encourage a culture of like open door, forthcoming communication, really highlight to employees that you don't want them there if they are sick and that they should stay home. And what they can do, what should they do exactly if they are sick? Send an email to the owner, boom, off the schedule, or, create some kind of dialogue among employees that there's a system for if they need their shift covered. One of my clients uses a certain application where they can just request coverage for a shift that they need to miss. And they can do that within up to like 2 hours before their shift. So really making a culture where you're not adding stress to the employee who's sick, so that they feel like they can't come to work. It should be really encouraged that they should stay home, and why, not just because you don't want your employees to get sick, but also recognizing that there are a number of like OSHA audits and things like that can really catch employers in kind of like their blind spots, and implementing certain things like that will help ensure that you are not jammed up in the event of some kind of audit like that.
There's actually some questions that are coming through here. One is actually was from Menti, which I thought that was also relevant. He said that's also, she was wondering if some practical advices from the employees to support them to work and feel safe in the work environment. Is anything such that can actually be out there? And the other question here we have from Kendra was, as someone who is recovering from COVID because my partner contracted it from a coworker who didn't disclose a positive test, your employees should just absolutely feel safe at work, and employers encouraging that transparency is part of that as well.
Yeah, so last year there was something called the FFCRA, which was a certain kind of leave. I'm sure you're all familiar, where employees were able to get paid if they missed work due to COVID. Now that has expired at the end of last year, but the current administration is allowing employers to retain this tax credit if employees are using this leave. And so, most of my clients, essentially, they're going with this leave, even though they're not required under the law. They're essentially saying, look, like we'd rather pay you for 2 days of missed work, or offer some kind of paid time off, and creating some kind of nuanced paid time off policy so that employees don't feel like missing work is going to put them in an extremely jeopardizing financial situation. And so just recognizing that you will receive this tax credit at the end of this year is helpful. And working with somebody, whether it's an advisor or an employment attorney or a CPA, on how to make sure that you are getting those tax credits at the end, I think is important. So.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Any questions from the audience? And one of the other things also I'm going to mention, I guess, contrary to Tom, who's with a small business administration and can refer to other small business administrations in different states, what are the other places that, you know, for example, if I am in Massachusetts and I don't have like a contact with a employment lawyer like yourself, Sarah, what are the resources that you can advise, you know, the audience or the members to tap into so they can get some necessary help, especially those who are starting new businesses and they are new in this space, or even those who are also existing who probably didn't even have any, you know, employment lawyer on, you know, on, as I say, on call. What are the places that you can actually advise people to go to if they need some help?
Yeah, I mean, I think most trade associations have a number of legal partners that they work with. So whether it be your local trade association or maybe perhaps like your Chamber of Commerce, or, I mean, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'm happy to, I have colleagues in other states, so I'm happy to sort of help guide that conversation. But I do think that there are certain things that you want to look for in an employment lawyer, because I know a lot of people don't think to have an employment lawyer until they're involved in employment litigation. And it's like, why let it get there? It's not necessary. And so, you know, a few things that I would look for if I was looking for an employment attorney is, you know, what is their background? Have they worked specifically with my type of small business? Are they transparent with me when I speak to them? And you know, some attorneys, maybe not everyone, but they will kind of have like an initial call with you and do almost just like a big picture audit for you, because they can spot these things really quickly. And then and have that conversation. It's not risky. It might take 30 minutes of your time, and then you'll have at least a heads up as far as like things that you could add into your business. And then you can decide at that juncture if that's something that you want to invest in. So.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I'm actually going to shift back again to Tom. So unless anybody has any question, please raise your hand, put your question into the chat here. Put your camera on, because as I said, this is an interactive opportunity to exchange. So feel free to participate as much as you want. Tom, I know kind of like what Sarah is talking about here, just some of like the fundamental things that we need to be thinking as business owner of any sort of any kind. I want you to kind of go back on some of the fundamental principles of just good businesses that you can advise, you know, to our audience here and also our members, kind of like the similar to what Sarah had just like shared with us, like, you know, having, you know, some of the basic, you know, coverage for, you know, with a business lawyer. What are some of the fundamental, you know, principles that everyone who's running any business should be thinking about, should actually, you know, have in the back of the packets? And this could be anything from the 5 Ps or the 5 Cs, anything that you feel like you want to share here that you have seen that are very relevant based on your experience working with a local roaster.
Well, that's a great segue there for us. But I think going back to what Sarah was saying, she made me think of something as we're talking here. And I think it's important to point out, there's 21 of us that are on this call together. And I think one of the most valuable things, if you want to call it a fundamental or not, but is to realize that you're not by yourself. It's a very lonely place to be in a business and trying to run it and solve all the problems that are there by yourself. And when you're talking about compliancy, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about sales, it can be very lonely. So it's good to be able to be part of an association or a peer group, whether it be BNI or a Chamber of Commerce or a CEO executive peer group. The value is in sharing information, lesson learned, and best practice. You mentioned the 4 Ps that are there: people, product, process, and promotion. Those are areas that I spend and I concentrate my time with clients on, and also with my own business. And there is definitely a compliancy side of what Sarah was talking about, but being able to recruit train and retain top talented people, that's an element of marketing. And we take for granted the recruiting process that we use. And if you take and you break down the steps as she was talking about, we have a handbook that's there, but this is how we interview somebody. And then after you're done with an interview, what do you say to that candidate? Do you send them a letter? Do you send them an email? What can you say in that letter and email? But more importantly, when we make the decision to hire somebody and you bring them on board, that's an important moment in any of our life when we start a job. And we could go back and just think about the first or second job we had in our life. And you can remember your first day working for that boss. You probably even remember what that boss was like, what he or she was like. When we start a new job, that's an important day. So if we take a moment and just think about the power of moments and how can you make that a memorable event and remarkable that employee can remember it. To me, that's an important element to brand, and don't take it for granted, because it will help set the tone for what you expect as an employer, but it also helps set the tone for your culture. People go to work because they enjoy the culture. They go to work for a team with which they feel like they're a part of and can help win. We go to work and we be part of something that we buy into. So in that process, I think that a lot of people, what they lose is that identity of tying into a vision for the company. And we take for granted the power of that vision, but the elements that go into a simple vision statement, it's nice to have that, and they think that that's all a nice part of a business plan. But if you want to see a business plan in action, many years after his life, is Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It's one of the best vision statements that I've ever heard. But what it does, it conveys how he thinks that we all as a community can improve the future. It's having a business is really no different. You're looking where you are today and you want to have a better future for that business and engage your employees to follow that. And Simon Sinek, he's got a great presentation on it where he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you think about why do people listen to that "I Have a Dream" speech, it's Dr. King's motivation, the enthusiasm, his why behind presenting that. And then if you think about successful entrepreneurs, the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk's of the world, why did they get involved in what they're doing? The why behind what they did is important. And I was reading this morning about Steve Jobs' 1980 vision statement, where he was talking about the personal computer. And he was actually on stage talking about it. And he made it akin to taking a train, going somewhere with a train where everybody gets on board with it, or everyone using a bicycle to get where they're going. And he said basically that the idea of a personal computer was the same way. And audience was a little confused at that, but he was saying it. It says, can you imagine this? 1,000 people trying to use one computer. That's like taking a train, versus 1,000 people using 1,000 computers. That's like taking a bicycle. It allows the freedom to go where you want to go, when you want to go. And that simple little vision statement, as easy as he put that, enabled us to understand something that at the time in 1980, nobody had any idea what a personal computer could be used for. As we're all talking on one today, we can look at that from where we are. It was him being able to articulate a vision into the future and get people behind that. It's the same thing with what we have with a business. And I work with this daily with people is, I'd love to know what your "I Have a Dream" speech is for your business. Where are you going to take your employees? Where are you going to take your customers? Because that's the inspiration that they're going to follow. I think too many businesses forget the importance of that.
Yeah, I think, one sentiment that I often find with my clients is that, like, the legal and the financial, it's kind of like a buzzkill, right? It's always, it's in the back of your mind, it's weighing you down, you have to do it. And there's like this sinking feeling that you're missing something or you're going to get sued somehow. And it's very unsettling. And I think that's a really universal feeling. And so getting ahead of that, right? And kind of putting things in place in your business that prepare you for all of these situations, I think that frees up your mental bandwidth to then actually focus on your business. It's exhausting to kind of have that feeling all the time. And I think if I've learned one thing from this pandemic, it's that you can at least do things that help you get in front of the unexpected, and the unexpected will still happen, and you'll have to pivot even if you have great policies, but at least you have that structural foundation. And I think that's really important. And I think when you don't have it, you're kind of just like wobbly, and you're almost just like looking at your business and navigating through this unknown time, like kind of, with like blinders on, and you're kind of looking up and hoping that things don't go wrong. And I just think there's a really empowered way to approach these things. And I would just encourage people to, reach out to me after this, reach out to Tom, reach out to your local trade association or chamber of commerce, because there are really good resources. And then also filter. You don't need to read everything. You don't have to, there's so much content out there too, that overwhelming saturation can happen. And so it's just good to have like one or two people in your corner that you trust will watch out for some of these blind spots.
I have a really good note. Another thing that I'd remembered on that, when you say that be careful with that oversaturation of information. And in today's climate, I think it's really important to know, but they have this phrase for young military people that no information is bad. Good information is good, but bad information is treason. And what they mean by that is, if you make decisions based off bad information, it could really affect your business and a lot of elements that are out there. So I think it is good to put that filter on there and get a second opinion from people.
Definitely.
This is great. This is great. And I also want to mimic what Tom was saying here earlier, which I always think that it's always very powerful. Just be purposeful. I think that's, in business, why are you doing what you're doing? And I think that's, I always kind of wake up and ask myself that, and I always think that it's always interesting for me, kind of like how I pivoted. I'm from Burundi, which, some of you know, which is a third world country. But really, when I came to this country, I came because I was running out of poverty of Burundi, and I wanted to get a better future, a better life, and came in and had a great education, had a great career with so many wonderful organizations, but went back to my to my country. Everything that I do now is actually focusing about the people of Burundi, because to me it became very purposeful, and it became more of a joy. So whatever you do, I think, as a roaster, as a cafe owner, as a barista, you name it, but just be thinking about why you're doing what you do. But I always tell people, do what really brings you joy. Just focus on that, and I think that everything else that you do also become very easy. Thank you so much for both of you from sharing your contacts. So Sarah did share her contacts, so did Tom. So if you want to reach any of them on any questions that you might have past this call, please feel free to do so as well. So we still have about 10 minutes into the call. So if you have any specific questions, please bring them forward. Otherwise, I can dig more into Sarah's and Tom's mind as well to share more of the insight, because I know both of you have some amazing and incredible information to share with our audience. But this is really your time. I don't want just the three of us to be talking. So I'm going to pause for a second and just allow anyone who wants to ask questions to feel free to open the camera and ask.
Jeanine, I have one thing I want to leave everybody with on, if I gave them one thing that they take away with on this, is if you're operating a business, do yourself a favor and get into 2021 with a good budget. Really get into a budget and identify that budget as best as you can, and do what you can to increase your revenue, increase your gross profit, and minimize your expenses.
I'd just like to say, I have a comment. I don't want to open my camera. I hope you don't mind. But I just have a comment. I'm a small company that has a minority certification in the state of Georgia. And one of the things that the Georgia Minority Supplier Diversity Council did was solicit funds from donors to support the annual fees for small companies. So this year, the burden was just to complete the application, and then I could submit for, a grant or whatever to pay for that certification. And that was small. I mean, it's not a big expense. It's what, $500 to $1,000, but it was greatly appreciated. So I think, as a small business, as we look around for those little things that kind of says that others that you support all the time and you look to, that they support you during this difficult time, it just means a little bit more. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I love that. I think whether it's an attorney or a good friend or a trade association, having kind of those core people in your corner who are like looking out for your specific business, especially those businesses that have these unique certifications. I think there's a lot of creative resources and particularly funding opportunities for minority owned, women owned, things like that. And they often are places you won't even look. So one thing I had a client have pretty good success with was she set like a Google alert just for, she played with it a little bit, but she put like women-led business grant options, Los Angeles, so that she would receive some notification of some of these things. And I think there's a lot out there if you look for it. Yeah.
This is wonderful. This is great. And this, by the way, it's recorded. So anyone who didn't get a chance to listen to this, please do know that it's going to be out there to be tapped into, for future use. And it's going to be on the usa.sca.coffee/blog. So that's a place to kind of go back in the future. And as also, the both of you has just really shared some, incredible and valuable information here for our audience. I want to really thank the both of you for really spending the time to do that. And then also do reach out for some help. And I think that's, most of us, especially small businesses, there's so much that we can do, but there is just limited, capacity that we have to actually be able to do what we really want to be able to accomplish successfully. So maybe both of you, Tom or Sarah, I don't know if you might have some kind of input for our audiences, like what are the other places they can be thinking about to tap into some support that they might need in this time and also this environment.
One of the biggest aspects that I think is out there that's free coaching available for you is through the Small Business Administration. You can go to the SBA with questions about business, questions about loans and so forth. They don't have the manpower to help you directly, but what they do is they're tied into CWE, which stands for the Center for Women in Enterprise, that can help with that. The Small Business Development Center Network, which is national. Each state has their own chapter. And then they also have what's called the SCORE, Senior Corps of Retired Executives. Just a group of a wealth of information that's there, and people that have technical abilities to help you with business planning, marketing planning, loan applications, and so forth. And as Phyllis was talking about, those certifications that are out there for both women-owned business enterprises and minority-owned business enterprises, they can help you with that, and also to gain access to both statewide and federal contracts.
I can vouch for the resources at the SBA just from personal experience. I reach out to somebody probably like once a month, and I just run some basic financial questions by them, and I've found it to be really valuable. I also wanted to just make myself available. If anybody on this webinar wanted to just email me their employee handbook, I'm happy to like jump on a 30-minute call and just give you like a brief overview of my thoughts. And because honestly, there's nothing I hate more than litigation. I did it for 10 years. It's a miserable place to be. So I'm very passionate about helping small business owners just stay out of it. And so, yeah, feel free to email me.
Thank you. Really, really terrific. Thanks for the both of you. This is amazing information and also so helpful for all of us. As I say, I hope each one of you can take something to apply right away in your own business. And please do know, we are all here for each other. This is a very small community. I always tell everybody, you know, the coffee industry is a small family. If you have any questions or struggling with anything, reach out to me. I might not have an answer for you, but I might just like know where to lead you or what to tell you to go. So we are all here to help each other. We are all here to support each other. And also, if you have any idea about some of the other talks you might want to have us, you know, lead in the future, let me know. I'm here to be doing this business chat on a regular basis, and I'm very open on ideas and also potential speakers you might have in mind that you might want to advise us that we consider to bring forward. So thanks again so much for everyone. I know that Nancy opened her camera and maybe might want to say something, and you're all welcome.
Oh no, Jeanine, you covered it so well. I just wanted to thank everyone. And yes, I wanted to kind of remind people that we have our email address. I'll put it in the chat, the US chapter at SCA.coffee. And the purpose of these business chats, Jeanine's kind of our fearless leader on them. But I think the point is that we want to be supportive to our community. We heard that retail businesses were you know, kind of entering 2021 with sort of like grim outlooks. And that's why we quickly had reached out to these experts, Tom and Sarah, and had them here. But we look forward to so many more different types of conversations. And it only works if folks can tell us what they are looking for, what they're interested in, what things they're struggling with, or even just sharing inspiring stories. I think having a call just to share good things is also always welcome. So give us that feedback and give us that input. And the chapter is really here to support businesses. And this is the type of conversations we want to keep going on this program, the Business Chats. So thank you, Jeanine. Thank you, Tom and Sarah. And thanks for all of you for participating.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm gonna ask Tom and Sarah to come back again in the future, because I know we all have some incredible, you know, resources and information to share that sometimes it's very hard to share in 1 hour. So I want to then again say thanks to everyone. And if you have any questions, as I say, you know how to reach us. If you don't, I'm also going to put in my contact. If you want to reach out to me later on, feel free. And as I say, we are all here for each other. So.
Thank you very much, Jeanine. I'm glad to have been here.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and have a great year.